Rhonda Mary, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am doing really well. I appreciate you chiming in somewhere on something today, and it dawned on me that you know what, you would be great to have in this series with people doing real outreach, people who are representing the gun community and not afraid to just not entertain the echo chamber, right? But maybe challenge the echo chamber in some ways and reach outside the industry. One of the other things that I know you do a lot of work with as far as like welcoming new people into the gun community, right? And making sure that they feel welcome. And I think
Hmm.
that's important. So that's really, I think, where we start. I gave a little intro to some of the people that we were earlier, but we're going to cut out the hello, hi, how are you? While I'm just alone when we post this. So give everybody an idea. I did tell everybody that you were one of our speakers at the 2A rally in
Hmm.
2020. You did a
Hmm.
great job. We got a lot of positive feedback there on your contributions. And maybe just give people a little bit of like a 30-second to 60-second, how'd you get here? What do you do? And then we'll get into the chat.
Okay. So, my name is Rhonda Mary. I am a YouTube content creator, and basically, I talk about both political and social topics. I recently, it was kind of simultaneous as I was learning more about politics and learning more about like the Constitution and the Second Amendment. I was in a kind of volatile situation that could have went bad where after that situation, which was like a hit and run slash road rage type of thing. And then after that, I ended up becoming armed shortly after that. And so once I started learning the historical relevance, and just the impact of it, statistics and all of that, I particularly fell in love with the history of it, as it relates to the Black community, and so I just been going ever since.
So it being the Second Amendment, gun rights, things like that, I'm
Mm-hmm.
assuming, right? So yeah, so
Yes.
so we just had Kevin Dixie was actually one of the first people to join in on this series, and of course he gives that a little bit passionate speech about the history of gun rights and how it's affected the Black community, obviously throughout our history, and especially post Civil War in what's supposed to be the freedom era. The early years weren't so free, and a lot of that was really oppression that was done in a very, I mean, let's call it like the ultimate identity politics, right? In some ways, at least in the history of our country. So I think that almost gets us right into the heart of this, which is, I think, as a true advocate, you need to be reaching to the people who aren't already in the community, who aren't already diehards. The role that you do have as an advocate inside of the community is making the community better and stronger, and letting people know when you're not helping, letting people know how they are helping, and then telling people how they can help, especially, is a big part of what we do at Second Amendment Organization. So where were you 2 years ago? Because I wasn't planning on going here, but because of the way you kind of introduced your story and how you got here, so let's say 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, where were you in terms of, do I need a gun? Do I want a gun? Should people have guns? 5 years ago.
I was so first of all, just a few, I don't know, this was a few years ago. A guy that I previously dated, he had a firearm, but never took the time to teach me anything about it. And I just remember saying, like when I'm over here, I don't want to see it. I don't
Yep.
want to know you have it. And then the crazy part about it is that he actually had a nephew that was killed due to negligence not long after. And so that makes it even more personal for me, because me being so close to that situation and having to go to the funeral of a child that was killed, due to negligence, ignorance, the mystery, and everything else that goes into some of the negative stereotypes that go into gun ownership. And me looking back, if I would have known what I know now, could have possibly, that situation could have been differently, or not even me, right? But the influence that I have now and being around certain people, it impacted me.
Sure.
And so I think that a lot of those things can be negated by simple education.
I agree 100%. That is a tragic story, and it's interesting though, that wasn't obviously what got you into
No, it was
advocacy. If
not.
anything, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did that make it less likely that you wanted guns around at that moment?
No, because even then, knowing the father of the child and his lifestyle and things like that, I felt like it was a personal type of situation that if he just knew this, if he
Yeah.
just knew that, maybe it could have been a little different. So I wouldn't say that I took that negatively as it relates to gun ownership. No, I did
Okay,
not.
good. Good. So you weren't obviously a gun owner. You weren't a gun enthusiast, and in fact, at one point,
Correct.
within a handful of years, you were you were just like, yeah, keep it in the closet. Keep it in the box. Keep it in the
Yes.
safe. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to mess with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you are an example of exactly the kind of people that I think a lot of us are talking about lately, which is people can change their minds. People can have an
Yes,
education.
absolutely.
People can have an epiphany. People can evolve. People can move forward. And that is so important to the work of an advocate, because if you don't believe that, how can you do advocacy, right?
Right.
So when someone
Mm-hmm.
puts on that hat and says, well, I'm Second Amendment advocate, or I'm a Second Amendment activist, but they are never going to change their mind. I'm not going to waste my time talking to them. What do you say there? I mean, other than your own story.
Well, I think that everybody's gonna have their own journey, and it's a very personal, experience as the role that will play in the community. But I would say that people that's actually interested in engaging people, you have to know how to talk to people and make it relevant to their own experiences. What works for the people that I'm trying to reach may not work for somebody else. And so everybody is going to take a different approach based on their target demographic. Now, some might say, oh, well, we just want to expand the gun community altogether. But we have to keep in mind that when you're marketing to people, every type of marketing doesn't work the same for everybody. And even in the gun community, we still have different type of
Of
gun
course.
owners and different reasons for why people actually own firearms. I don't hunt. So it's not a hunting commercial that's gonna inspire me, you know
Right.
what I mean, as compared to like those personal stories that I talked about. So it really just depends on, even though yes, we want to expand the gun community, I think all of us are gonna play a part based on our, strong suits and how we're able to get through to people.
So let's talk about that. If and it's hard for me to even say this out loud seriously, but I'm gonna try. Let's pretend that there's a group of people who are like super ultra conservative, traditional kind of gun ownery type people, but they don't own guns, and they aren't even sure that people should own guns. So I'm gonna go market to them. In my marketing to them, if I say things like, well, you need guns because Antifa and the leftists and the communists are taking over our country and we need to defend our country, my view is that that doesn't really help, because you're only encouraging people to join the gun community by ostracizing other people, as opposed to a story which is, I don't care why. If you want a gun to hunt, cool. You want a gun to defend yourself, cool. You want a gun because of some other political belief that you think is maybe going to try to oppress you in the future, that's fine. But also the other people on the other side of that political belief might also buy a gun to defend themselves against a perception they have that you're a threat. Well, I'm not a threat.
Right,
Okay, cool.
absolutely.
That's fine. But that inclusiveness, I love the idea of specializing, right? Because there's people I can't reach, there's people you can't reach, but
Right,
we can also
absolutely.
reach people,
Mm-hmm.
but not doing it in a way that sort of fear mongers against other people who maybe should be joining our cause, right?
Yeah, I would say, I'm really not big on like fear mongering. I do think we want to be I mean, but we're talking about guns. Like, so to some extent, your gun is to protect you from some type of threat unless you are hunting. But ultimately, if we're having if we're talking about the Second Amendment as it's written, that's threat of government. Like,
Sure.
that's literally what it is. Being able to be a force against our state if they decide to be a force against us. So, you know, I mean, there's going to be some level of fear mongering there because we're literally talking about safety concepts and self protection. And for you to have a mindset of situational awareness, you have to be aware, you know? So I
I
don't.
think there's a lot of people ask me about people who carry guns being paranoid, right?
Mm-hmm,
And I always say,
mm-hmm.
look, the education about what real threats are out there and which threats you can address with a firearm is part of the process. And
I
what I
agree.
hope is that, and what I believe is that through that educational process, you become prepared, not paranoid.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
that to me is the difference between fear mongering and an education about realistic threats and realistic risks and how you can maybe mitigate them with training, preparation, equipment, things like that. So to me, there's a big difference between you need a gun, you're going to die, and hey, listen, if in this set of circumstances, a gun's not going to help you. I get that. Get some medical training, get some unarmed defense training, whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
over here, there's some places where a gun could help you. And I want you to understand that. And by the way, even if you don't believe that and it's not right for you, that person over there, they may want a gun for that situation. So again,
Right.
outreach beyond the community, I really do draw a line between fear mongering and establishing that there are reasons to fear not being prepared.
Right. I think it's a languaging
Sure.
issue, right? And it could be very subjective. So I think depending on who you're talking to, what one person might see as fear mongering, another person could see as preparation. And so, you know, you are going to have some extreme examples of people going overboard, but we do want people to, you know, be prepared, kind of keep an open mind. And like you said, with training is going to help you mitigate, if you have a good trainer, right, some of those biases, some of those fake false alarms, you know, when you can actually when your life is in imminent danger, right? Not like oh, I felt threatened, or I felt a little bit threatened, right?
Right, right.
Like
Yeah, like when you need it.
I have to use force in this situation. And so I think a lot of those things are curbed with education, like you said.
Yeah, I believe that that's a big part of the message. How many do you have people from outside of the gun community or people who are just new to it that express anxiety to you about what they perceive as a lack of education inside of the gun community, maybe from a negligence standpoint, accidents, leaving guns unattended, things like that, or from a pulling a gun out on a shoplifter or something when you didn't need to perspective?
Not often. I don't really. I've had a couple of those talks, like maybe in person. I had a lady that was adamant about, you know, her child being with the father and feeling like, you know, the father wasn't as maybe careful as she would typically be. And, you know, I use that as an example to talk her through, well, don't you think the most empowered thing for you would to be to take some reign in this situation and make sure that if your child is going to be around a firearm, you already know this, you can put your child in a better position by making sure that they're educated, by making sure that they know basic safety. Like, you have that right too. You don't have to just feel like it's all on the father. That's just not the case, right? And that's even comes to when your child is going to a friend's house or when they're going
Absolutely.
to a school. Like, we have to take on some of the responsibilities of these things. And so, like, I'm very big on, like, you have rights, you have responsibilities. And so more so what I get is, like, I got a mom that hit me up today. She's a single mom in New York City, and she's like, I don't have a business, but I need to be able to protect myself out here. Because, you know, they make it easier for business owners
Yep.
to protect
Justify.
themselves, you know. But this is a mother, obviously living in, you know, an area that may not be the most favorable, that wants to defend her life. And it's like, you know, look how I'm being affected by this. So that's more so what I get. Like, you know, how can I learn more? What can I do? You know, how can I get my concealed carry, and just people that are really kind of more inquisitive
That's
about being
do you
armed.
do you find that people that are new to the community either A have apprehensions about other people in the gun community or being associated with anything in the gun community? And then maybe the other question is, did they worry about being judged by their friends? Like, well, I don't want my mom to know, I don't want my friends to know, you know, how do I carry a gun so no one can tell? You know, is that because I have people come up to me, like at dinner parties, as an example. I'm at a dinner party, somebody tells somebody I'm the gun guy, you know, and then over by the cheese dip, somebody's going to be like, hey, I have a gun too, right? And then later that night, like over by the wine, somebody's going to be like, hey, I'm thinking about getting my concealed carry permit, you know, but no, but if everybody just stops and everybody just says, hey, who has a gun? It's like 80% of the people have one or are interested in it, but they don't want to talk about it. Do you see any apprehension there?
I forgot the first question you asked me.
It's kind of the same thing. Do you see people worrying about
Like
being
being you
associated
asked,
with guns?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think more people are worried about being associated with the gun community than guns where I'm from. And why I say that is because the way the gun community is represented is that this is whether it's mainstream media, movies, word of mouth. It's always been represented to me as only school shooters, gangsters, and white supremacists need guns. Like, that's it.
Like,
Nobody else. That's the only people that got guns, you know, unless you John Wick, and that's just movie type stuff. And so that's more so the messaging that is overshadowing of the gun community, and you have tons of people that don't want to be associated with that. And so there is a messaging issue. There's a languaging issue. I do think that you have people that could cross over the aisle to make sure that we're breaking some of those barriers or some of the stereotypes that have been put on the gun community. So absolutely, that's one of the main things I get, that people don't want to be associated with that. The second part you asked me about dealing with their family and stuff like that. The younger generation, I mean, I don't really think, you know, like as far as me and my sister is armed and my brother-in-law and my cousins, whereas our aunts and uncles and our parents, not as much. And I don't think we really care. We may not talk about it. Like for me, I've been able to inspire my family, particularly my mom and my aunts, to actually go shooting. So that was a special, impactful moment for me, and hopefully I was able to inspire other people. I think there are conversations that we could have, and I think bringing somebody to the range can lower some of the misconceptions that's there if we can just get them there, right?
That's a big thing, like with Maj Toure over at Black Guns Matter, the idea of bringing people in who would not maybe, I did an event with him in Atlanta a few years ago where I think, you know, I feel like we did a show of hands or something, and it was like great range, very open range. Obviously they were hosting the whole event, but it was like, how many people have been to this range before? Like hardly any in the crowd. Well, how many people have been to any gun range? Hardly any. How many people have been to a gun shop? And what it comes down to is, yeah, we're not comfortable.
Right.
Like Maj is here, so we're cool. We're not sure about you.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And it's like, okay, so we need to break that down. Once somebody gets in, it's like, I'm not going to say there's not a gun shop where someone's going to go in and not feel comfortable. And that's whether it's me or it's you. Like you might go into a gun shop, and if you're like the tattoo guy with the nose ring and, you know, whatever, the long hair, the guys may look at you judgy. If you're black, if you're Hispanic, whatever, we know that happens. But every city, every region has at least 1, 2, 3, 5 gun shops. I could tell people, yeah, you want to go here, or you want to go here, or you want to go here. I don't know about Billy Bob's Shack 10 miles outside the city, but I know those 4 guys and those 4 ranges are awesome and so inclusive. If anything, it's almost like an overcorrection our community has seen in the last 10 years where people can really see the need to be welcoming. And again, somebody's making a comment about like Maj comes off better in person on Instagram. I get it. Like he's one of he cares. He's passionate. He's a little harsh sometimes on social media. I think he comes off edgy, but yeah, like some other people come off a little softer. I come off, I'm sure, like a jerk to some people, but that's what the passion is. I think I've done the work with Maj. I know where his heart is in it. And I believe that outreach of bringing people to the range, anyways, what I was thinking is so important, right? If he doesn't do those events in a church somewhere off on the side, come to the range, and then we'll talk about it.
I've been able to get my mom, my dad, several of my uncles, my aunt, like some of my friends. So it's been really cool. Like it's been a really cool experience. And one thing that I'm really trying to implement is another thing is you have a gun community that a lot of it looks a certain way, whether that's the media, whether it's the way, who's in the gun community, whether it's the way people promote themselves. I can't really, uh, you know, wrap that up, but I will say that a lot of times it's also for beginners, it's this fear. They also make us feel like gun owners are Rambo, like, or
Right.
John Wick, or, like whoever. And so for me, it's like I'm just regular. Like I'm Rhonda Mary. I'm your everyday next door. Like I like to have fun. I like to joke. I'm not a gun enthusiast. I'm not a gun enthusiast. I care more about the Second Amendment than I do about the type of trigger you have, or the scope,
Yes.
or the optic, or the newest firearm coming out. It's just not my thing. Like even with me being around them more, I'm just kind of like, get me something that'll fit in a cute little nice holster or something.
Well, it's got
That's
to be cute.
a little cute, a little
Maybe that
cute.
little fringe. So,
Yeah,
but
a
I think
little
that's so
something.
important. I did that for a long time. I was writing for the magazines. I'm old, right? So I was writing for magazines and all that stuff in the '90s, and really into the gun thing. A gun geek, right? Like I knew all the things, the new gun coming out, the new stuff, whatever. Now there weren't as many accessories. There was like 3. 8 holster companies. Where now there's like 8,000 holsters, so you got to keep up. But I did tune out for like a decade when I was building the Vol Training Center. We were developing the CFS curriculum. We were doing all those things. Really, the growth in my training career, I kind of tuned out. Be like, have you seen the new XY whatever? No.
I was
I'll
like,
see it when a student brings it through class. I'll see it. I'll start paying attention when I see 10 students bring it through class, and then I'll give you an opinion. I've kind of gone back into now I'm into like 3D printing and like doing guns, stuff like that. So I'm more in a gun enthusiast mindset lately, the last year or two, than I have been, I think, for a decade. But that's important to acknowledge, right? You don't have here you are doing this good work, doing all this stuff, and I see people get beat up for, oh, you don't even know what the new SIG P17. Like, I don't care what the new SIG P327X is.
right,
I care
right.
about how you press the trigger, or I care about how you carry your gun safely, or I care about that you store it appropriately around your kids. That's what I'm doing.
And a lot of people in the gun community, and I do this because I use that
Yeah,
loosely,
right.
because, whatever. But I don't think a lot of people know how off-putting that can be. It can be very intimidating. I've had people get on to me about the way I choose to carry, or the size of my firearm, or this or that. Safety is the highest order. We want to make sure people are safe and are comfortable. You don't want to buy something that you're never going to use. You don't want to buy something that looks super cool that you never train with. You don't want to buy something very expensive that you don't know how to store it, right? So like these are the most important components if we want to change the discussions, the negative discussions, and curb some of those negative stereotypes about gun ownership.
Yep, yeah, I agree. I think so. Let's go there then. We've got maybe 5-8 minutes left. We've got a bunch of great comments. I don't really see any questions. If people have questions, specifically on this topic, questions for Rhonda, ask them down there in the comments. I'll try to get them in here. What is your advice then to someone? Let's say there's somebody who has been doing this for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and they feel like this is all changing fast. Like I don't know where this is all out of nowhere. Like I've been doing this for a long time, and I definitely can see things I used to do that were maybe even good for the time. Like even on the training side, okay, that made sense to teach in 2003, but I'm not teaching in 2013, let alone 2021. On the advocacy side, I certainly have made mistakes as well. I think our whole community, right? If you look at a lot of like the leadership in the community, for example, just tripling down on Republican Party only. And now we've got a us versus them mentality, as opposed to, hey, that's gun rights or human rights. We should be working with Democrats to keep it off the party platform. But instead there was a kind of siege mentality. So a lot of people, I think, feel overwhelmed and left behind by the fact that there's all these new gun owners and they don't look like them, they don't sound like them, they don't think like them, and it's scary. What do you say to them?
Who cares what they think?
So wait, who cares what the advocates think, or who cares what the other people that don't like those advocates, like, you know what I mean? Or just anybody, just do your thing.
Yeah, like I literally do not care what people think. Like I do not care. Like it's not something you can take from me. It's not something you can give me. You don't give me my rights. And so I don't care what people have to say about them. I don't care about people's personal biases. I don't care about making people
Okay,
uncomfortable.
I
I
got it.
don't.
I understand. I didn't mean like, what do you say to them, like to get mad at them? I'm saying, well, how do you help them? What if they come to you and they
Oh,
say,
okay.
yeah, no, okay.
I'm like, yeah, I don't. They
I'm
can
like
do
you've asked the wrong question.
anything.
I'm like,
Like,
I don't know what question you're answering, but what I mean is that, so yeah, because I do agree with that, right? Do your own
okay.
thing and move on. But for the person that is wanting to help, right? The person who's just sitting there like, I don't even know what to say. And when I say the thing I used to say, people tell me I'm not inclusive, or I'm not reaching out, or I'm offending people, I'm ostracizing this group or that group. If you were going to be like the advocate coach for a young, new perspective on the gun community, and again, they don't have to necessarily be trying to reach you, but just so they don't offend you or offend the people you're talking to, what advice do you have for them?
So the best advice I have for people is to probably get out of their freaking talking points. Like, get out of the bullet points. They don't work. If you're trying to talk to somebody like me, that whole, it's my God-given right, so I gotta have my guns. It's not gonna, I
Right.
feel nothing. Like, I don't care. Like, that's not the message that's going to reach me. It's just not. And so if you want to connect with people on a human level, right, you make very personal connections. So every single time I talk to people about gun ownership, I'm finding out more about them and finding out how this can relate and fit their life, their personal lifestyle. So this young single mother living in New York City, I may not have the same conversation with her as I would with some guy living, backside Mississippi. Those may be two different conversations, and it's about catering that and having a very personal experience. And like I said, I do have a certain demographic that I am personally trying to reach. So my message is going to look like that. And I imagine, people could argue the same, but sometimes if I'm going on other platforms or recently I talked to some guy up in Montana or somewhere. I don't even know where it was. He was like, we have like 1% of black people here, right?
Right.
And he's wanting to know, like, how can we reach other people? How can we get our message out and stuff like that? And it's about being a person, be a human. Like, make connections with people, help people understand, and teaching people and making people think a thought that they've never thought before can really spark moments. And sometimes today people may not feel you. They may not feel you. It may take years. It's things I used to talk about years ago that I've had people reach out to me and they'll be like, you remember, you was talking about this? Well, that really like stuck with me. And I'm like, okay, you tell me now, but I guess, all right,
Right.
but it works. So you just never know the seed you're planting. You don't know. And sometimes it takes a very steady, some people you got to warm them up. You have to warm them up to certain ideas and show them different nuances and different levels and different ways this affects them and things like that. And so, um,
I
you have,
like I like that, what you just said, that idea that, like, where you started and ended there for me, when you start with, you have to connect with someone on a personal level, and then you end with, it may not resonate with them, and it may take different levels or different exposures. And what that really means, you in the middle, you said, get away from your talking points, because if that's all you've got, right, and your talking points don't resonate with that person, well, now you're done, right? That's your job. You've done your job. Move on, because you're not going to get to them. And I think that frustrates a lot of people, for sure. The idea that, like, God-given rights, right? Well, which is that your God? Which God? Like, what if your God doesn't like the other people? Do they have that's the God-given rights has no place because it immediately limits, right? People talk about the idea of a natural right, way better, right? And I get it, because we have to remember that it's not the government giving us the rights. It's not the Second Amendment that gives us the rights. We have this right, and the right, we talk a lot about the right to self-preservation, and then the gun is the means to that. What the Second Amendment does, I think, really is it articulates it specifically in a way that the government should get it. Like, hey, you're not allowed to infringe on these rights, but also it's there to help the people fight against tyranny, or the fact that the government may need a well-regulated militia to protect itself from someone trying to take over. So it almost, and of course this is the big court debate, right? The individual right. Now, it was pretty much settled with Heller. That's great. It continues to move forward in the right direction, but the way it's written is like to remind the government to leave us alone because we have a naturally existing right. Do you think that when people run into that wall where there's not getting through, because I guess the key is you have to then be really diverse in your ability to talk about the Second Amendment so that it can reach different people. One of the things that a lot of us obviously talk about is, hey, maybe this person can help you or that person can help you. How have you found it to be easy to try to network with other people in the community so that you can make yourself a resource, and also then sometimes just hand somebody off and go, this person can help you out because they're in New York?
So that's literally like what I do. That's been my whole thing, like meeting, networking with trainers and different resources all over the country. So when people reach out to me, I'm able to basically, just pass them off to other people in those areas. And so making those connections have been super important, and I mean like detrimental for what I do in the small impact that I've been able to have. But networking is super important because like you said, like some people's messages, they're just not for everybody, or even some people's, it's kind of like almost like teaching styles, right? Every trainer, the trainer that you may like and think is the best trainer in the world, may not be able to get through to me or teach me the concepts in a way that makes the most sense to me. And so I think it's very personal experiences, and that's why networking is super important.
Yeah, that having that team, that strong team is so vital, right? And it may be that you do exactly the same things, just with a little different accent, right? And that's okay. There's a lot of conversation about the inner city, and I'm obviously listening to you. I'm reading some of the comments. I don't know if you're seeing them. Some of them are kind of insinuating the inner city has to go to the range, and what I'm reading into this is maybe it's a cultural reference to inner city, or like an urban reference, right? And obviously, if you have some thoughts, there's a gun culture in the urban environment, right, around our country. You go into any city, there's a gun culture that is not the gun culture that I grew up in, or the gun community that we're talking about, right? And I sometimes say there's a lot of tough guys on the internet that talk about will not comply. I think if they were in a room with people that actually carry guns every day that don't fill out 4473s, they might pee themselves. But there's a gun community. How do you interact at all there in terms of responsibility? Because I always say, look, I don't care if you filled out the form. If you go home and there's kids in the house, I want to talk to you about how you stage that gun. Do you have a safe, that kind of stuff? Do you interact at all at that level?
So I'm always talking about gun safety. I do have people that reach out to me that maybe live in certain areas or have been in situations that weren't favorable and kind of represent the culture that you're talking about. And so in those instances, yes, a lot of what I'm trying to do, and I need to get more into doing more content about, is how hip hop relates to the gun community. There's such a untapped area of potential, especially for some of the bigger, more known to a advocates to work alongside hip hop artists. Unfortunately,
And as I understand that, that's a type of music, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so I'm not obviously like that's not going to be a place where I'm going to find a lot of traction, right? But I see what you're saying. So again, go with the culture, go with the.
So what I mean by it being untapped potential is that at the present time you have a lot of artists, music artists who are catching charges simply on gun possession.
Yes.
No violent crimes, no robbery, no brandishing, none of that. It is simply, oh, you stopped me for a routine traffic stop. You happen to see this firearm in my car. Now I have a charge for gun possession. That type of unconstitutional handling is representative of what's going on in the inner cities. You have
Absolutely.
a lot of young Black men who don't know everything about gun safety. They may not have somebody teaching them, but they still have the desire and the human right, natural right, basic right, whatever you want to call it, to protect their life. And so just ramping up charges on nonviolent people, it's criminal and it's absurd. And so if we can attach these conversations, and like I said, this go back to languaging and making it relevant to how it affects every individual, because like that conversation is not probably the one that I need to have with Billy Joe, you know.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that's what happens with catering that message. And so I do think that there's a lot of room in hip hop culture to have some of these discussions, but some people don't even know that that right has already been fought for by people that are like literally, still living. When we
Yeah.
have people like
It's
Rhonda Ezell and, her case and what she's been through, and then even the history of arms as it relates to the Black community and civil rights and things like this. So on a federal level, on a constitutional level, we already have the right to protect ourselves. But some of these people, they don't know they're living in a freaking slave state that is trying to take away everything from them that their ancestors already basically worked towards, you know?
Well, not only that, I don't think traditionally our gun community has done a great job of outreach there or welcoming. I think that's something we're seeing change, but that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take building of trust. It's going to take legitimacy. One of the things we talk a lot about terminology and how words affect people and things like that. I advise people on two levels. Let's stop talking about law-abiding gun owners. I'm not sure what that service that's providing. How many people who use the term law-abiding gun owner then also turn around in the next meme and say will not comply?
Come and take it.
Yeah, or there is no all gun laws are unconstitutional, right? Like, so okay, so then why are we talking about law-abiding gun owners? And I get it, that's a high level, NSSF, NRA, that's a high level, but down here we still see people repeating it, and in the middle you're looking up saying, well. And if you have a gun and you've had that gun for a long time and you're thinking, well, now I get it. And I heard somebody tell me I can go to the range. I don't have any paper yet. I can go out there and get a permit. Like I'm not living this life of outside. I'm not fighting to get back in. I'm still in right before I catch that because I got pulled over for a right turn on red. Let me go get my permit. But we have to have that communication, and that whole law abiding thing is tough. So I think about responsible American gun owners, responsible gun owners, responsible. Forget about law abiding because it's, and I'm not advocating for people to run around breaking the law. What I'm saying is that terminology is going to push some people away, and also it's a little hypocritical if you're turning around and saying all gun laws are infringements, but I'm going to be a law abiding. No, stop. Responsible American gun owners.
And then even the whole law-abiding citizen, okay, but if you're in California and you are in New York, what about the constitutional federal law? Like that says shall not be infringed. That is law abiding, technically, if we're actually gonna go there. And so yes, that type of languaging does absolutely create division. And like I said, you just have some people that really just don't know, that are absolutely non-violent, right? But they are catching these charges anyway.
Yep.
And so are you really going to try to put them in the same category with your languaging as somebody that's committed a violent act, that's committed a actual robbery, that's been violent towards someone? Are we actually acting like these two people are the same? They're not. They're
Right.
not.
Well, no, not at all. And that's the whole thing about, should felons lose their rights forever? Is it violent felons, nonviolent felons? Felonies can tied to drugs, the whole war on drugs. I'm in Colorado right now. There are things that I could do here. Now, again, there's conflation because I have to choose my freedom, right? Do I want to be able to have this, or do I want to be able to have that? So I have to choose even here in Colorado, but there's things I can do in Colorado that I can't do in Florida at my other place. Right. And then there's places I go where I'm not supposed to have this, except that I have the magic piece of paper that says I'm a dealer. So I can, it's just, it is so convoluted. And I appreciate your fresh voice and perspective and your passion. And you, for someone who's only been doing this for a few years, you've got a fast education. And I appreciate you being part of my network with the Second Amendment Rally and coming in and talking to us about this. If we can do anything else at 2AO or anything, let us know. And hopefully you'll have a lot of people reaching out to you after this for some more coaching as an advocate, just so they don't have to become the expert at talking to the hip hop community, but we don't want to push the hip hop community away either.
Right. Absolutely.
How can people follow you other than obviously on Instagram?
Yeah. So I'm pretty much Rhonda Mary on everything on YouTube. Rhonda Mary, Twitter. I am Rhonda Mary because they, the whole censorship thing had to start another page. But type in Rhonda Mary, you'll find me.
All right. Fair enough. Thank you very much. And everybody, I appreciate